would go for Glenafric.
Ooh, at the moment, probably the sea outside my house.
Probably the Cairngorms. They're my hills of home. I've lived in the shadow of the Cairngorms for 30 years. It's where I find all these benefits that I've talked about, the recreational value, the spiritual benefits, and the sort of healing processes that work when you just kind of go into these areas and just let it hold you in its grasp. It's wonderful.
My favourite place is Roslin Glen. I've probably been there several hundred times, I think. In the summer I go there every week, winter perhaps not quite so often. And I've seen all kinds of wildlife and fungi and just being in a place which is such a natural forest that's just allowed to do its thing is utterly amazing.
If I had to pick one place out, that would be really difficult, because every time I get an experience like finding this little aspen, it just so lifts your spirit that you just want as many of these experiences as you can get. And it doesn't really matter whether it's a flower somewhere or seeing a bird or even stones. And the weather can even, a sudden change in the weather, it just makes you feel good about being out in a wild place. And I don't know, probably today, this has just made, I would say, made my day.
Yeah, my favourite place is just being outside, nice weather like this, just being relaxing with friends, things like that. Be good.
Well, my favourite wild place, there's a place in Patagonia called the Rio Turbio Valley, which is a super remote, unexplored place. The gauchos have to take you in on horses, and there's some big unclimbed walls in there. I've been there once before, but we didn't do any climbing, and I'm going back again soon. And it's incredibly wild. There's only ever been a handful of people in there, and I'm looking forward to getting back and hunting some wild pigs.
My favourite place is Stack Polly, and I like it because it's got lots of stones and you can climb, and because we had great fun and we're just going to climb up another one and climb down. So, see you later.
Spending time in Australia has had a big effect on my relationship with the natural world, because Australia is so enormous and its climate is so varied. I live in London, and it's come to appreciate it more and more. Just peace and quiet, time on your own and time with nature. Since I've lived in a big city and haven't had such easy access to those things.
Loch Lomond. Oh, me. My favourite place is here.
Where's that?
Loch Lomond. I don't know. My favourite place is here. Loch Lomond. Mine is Loch Lomond. Mine is Loch Lomond. So's mine. So's mine. I love Loch Lomond.
I represent the Ochil Hills, and my favourite wild place, of course, is getting way up in the Ochils, which I do nearly every weekend with my two dogs. It's not the wildest place in Scotland, but it's under threat from pylons, and I hope to keep it wild.
I find that completely impossible to answer. But you see, I don't think when you're in the wild, you should be doing relativism. I think that wherever I am in the wild is my favourite wild place at that particular time, because when you're in the wild, you are experiencing delight, I would hope, and that isn't relative, nor ever should be. And the thing about the wild is that it's simple. You leave all your human stuff behind, your mind becomes uncluttered, so you don't have to start, drawing up league tables and comparison and all that stuff. You can just be of the moment, in the place, and that's what's crucial. That's what we don't have in the me society. We don't have the places where we can get out of ourselves into the simplicities of the land. And that's why we have to preserve them as best we can, always.
You want to know my favourite wild place? It's probably an island in Loch Tay near Killin. Sandy Island, been camping there for years, and that's probably Camerons as well. I don't know. Is it?
Yeah. Well, yeah, my favourite wild place I think is Patagonia, the real Patagonia, not the company in California, but the southern third of South America. And I think I really love it because it reminds me of Montana or Wyoming of 100 years ago. And probably my favorite thing is to just walk about and come across a gaucho around a campfire somewhere and share a mate and kill a lamb and eat it with my fingers, and I think that's my favorite thing to do in the whole world. How's that?
What was the question? My favorite wild place? My favorite forest? Well, it just so happens I've been working a lot with a man named Elziard Bouffier, and he's been personally planting a forest near Vergon in France. And it's got mist and birds and running water. Beautiful place. That's my favorite. Yeah. It would have to be Vergon, the forest at Vergon. Yeah.
I could think of hundreds of places, but actually, strangely enough, I think my favourite wild place is my pond in my back garden, which is tiny and is not spectacular. But for me, every morning, going out and checking out what's happening to the tadpoles, what's happening to the frogs, that's where I go. That's what I love. That's my favourite wild place.
My favourite wild place is the botanics because there's so many plants that encourage wildlife.
My favourite place is Abernethy Forest. It's ever since I went there and saw a capercaillie and a golden eagle on the same day. So that's my favourite place.
Well, there are so many wonderful wild places. It's almost impossible to say that one is better than any others. But one that means an awful lot to me, and I've now been there 3 times, is Sulphun up in Sutherland. And what to me is wonderful about Sulphun is the way it rises magnificently. But one eye, if you look at it from the south or the north, it's a long well back. If you look at it from the west or the east, it's an incredible kind of narrow mountain peak. But the way it just rises above the bedrock of very, very old sandstone and just juts up, and it's so inaccessible. It's a long, long walk from whatever direction you go. And so to me, that is one of the very, very special wild places in the world.
My favourite wild place is Ranachbur. It's perhaps the wildest place in my constituency. It is utterly peaceful, although at times can be pretty rough, but a great, great wild place, and it must be cherished.
My favourite wild place is probably Luskintyre Beach on the Isle of Harris. Just a stunning 2-3 mile beach, white sand, dunes, the reeds, beautiful turquoise sea in front of you, and then behind you you've got the mountains of Harris and some incredible glens up there. And it's a great spot if you cycle or if you walk there and you end up at the end of a day just lying in the sand and listen to the sound of the surf. Just absolutely beautiful place to be, and that's why it's my favourite wild place.
It's in Australia. It's in New South Wales, just above the Victorian New South Wales border, and it's about a half an hour, 40-minute drive from a small town called Eden, as in the Garden of Eden, and it's an estuary called Womboyne. The closest person is an hour away, and there's about a 7.5 mile long beach this way with wild kangaroos and dingoes on one end, and another 4 miles of beach that way with all the wildlife, parakeets, and all the stuff that you see out in a national park in Australia. It's called Womboyne, and it's in Australia, and I don't want you to go there because you'll ruin it.
Well, I think my favourite place, it's not very wild, but it's wild enough, is New Timber Hill on the South Downs. You go up and you can see over the whole Weald, the South Down of Scotland, stretching off in each direction. And I went up there a lot as a kid. I know every little nook and cranny of the hill, and I always say if I ever got a girlfriend up there, I would ask her to marry me. And I did, recently. She said yes. So, it's a wild place.